19. This is on Sound City Council. I note that Councillor Thomas is not physically present, but is attending the meeting tonight by telephone. And Deputy Mayor O'Leary will be managing that sort of. We did not have a closed session tonight, so we're starting tonight. All the way down to number 4 on the agenda already, disclosure of pecuniary. Well, I'm going to go back. Number 4, call for additional business. Anyone? Councillor Koepke.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have some information regarding Police Week.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Tamming.
Good evening, Your Worship. I have some information on a very exciting housing development that is in the very embryonic stages called Indwell. I'd like to share that with the committee later, with Council.
Nobody else that way? Anyone this way? Councillor Gregg.
Thanks, Mayor Body. I had attended the film debut showing of Resilience last Wednesday.
And anyone else? Staff.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe it might be an item on the agenda, but if it's not, a quick verbal update of the Downtown River Precinct construction project.
Okay, and we've got you under deputation number 9C there, so you're covered. Now have approximately 5 things to update council on that I've either attended or just an update of what's going on. Oh, yeah, Richard, do you have any?
Nothing tonight, Your Worship.
Good, thanks. Strike one. Now, number 5, disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Anyone? Councillor Hamley?
Yep, I have a pecuniary interest with item 12A due to a close relative owning property in the vicinity of 1185 4th Avenue East.
Okay, anyone else? Seeing none. Confirmation of minutes from April 29th, 2019. Councillor Tamming? Are you on?
I move that the minutes of the regular council meeting held on April 29, 2019 as printed be adopted. Moved by myself and second by Brock Holmgren.
All in favor? And that is carried. Number 7 is a motion to move council into committee of the whole. Oh, Richard, I keep forgetting. You have to vote on that one. So that was...
I had my hand up, Your Worship.
I saw it, but the clerk didn't, so she's reprimanding me again for the first time of many. Thanks. So now we're down to number 7, motion to move.
Your Worship, I move that City Council now move into Committee of the Whole to consider public meetings, deputations, presentations, public question period, matters arising out of correspondence, reports of city staff, consent agenda, committee minutes, matters postponed, motions for which notice was previously given, and additional business.
All in favor? That's carried. Councillor Thomas?
In favor.
Good, thanks. That's unanimous. So now we're in committee of the whole. We have no public meetings at number 8. At number 9, we have a deputation from Tim Lanthier, I believe, from the Conservation Authority. Welcome. We'll get you to step up, push the button. It's probably purple. There we go.
Great. Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Mayor Body, members of council, staff. Thank you for having us here tonight. My name is Tim Lanthier. I am the Lands and Habitats Coordinator for the Conservation Authority, Grace Auble. With me tonight, I have John Bidorf, who is the Water Resources Manager for the Conservation Authority. I'd also like to acknowledge Councillor Koepke and Councillor Gregg, who sit on our Board of Directors. We're here this evening at the request of our Board of Directors via a resolution from the Board to seek your formal support and your input through the to the province through the Environmental Registry of Ontario. We're pleased to have this opportunity to speak before Council, so thank you. The reason for coming this evening is that some changes have happened for the Conservation Authority recently. 2 major items. One is budget cuts that have come forward in the last month or so, and the other is a proposal or request for comments from the province on the Environmental Registry of Ontario on changes to the Conservation Authorities Act. It's our belief that both of these items will affect not only Grace Auble Conservation, but also our member municipalities. And I'd like to note that we're very aware that our partners, including the city, are also facing various budget cuts. So I do have a presentation tonight. It is in a PDF format, unfortunately. I apologize, but it should suffice just the same. In Grey County and Owen Sound and the Grey Sauble watershed, we note that water is one of the great assets around here. This asset supports our vibrant tourism industry, it encourages development in the area, and it provides recreational opportunities for residents. However, as we've seen throughout the province and through the country recently, this asset can also be a threat that needs to be managed. We know that in large urban centers, damages associated with flood and erosion can reach into the high millions or billions, as we've seen in Calgary in 2013. Prior to the integration of conservation authorities into planning, the development planning process and flood management, Hurricane Hazel claimed the lives of 81 people in Ontario and cost what in today's dollars would be over $1 billion worth of damage. Following this, the province empowered conservation authorities to purchase properties that could reduce flood risk, to regulate development in hazard areas, and to manage flood and erosion structures to assist with mitigating floods. So now in Ontario, thanks largely to the skilled yet often unseen work of conservation authority staff, most flooding that occurs happens in undeveloped areas. However, in historic developed areas, we still do see flooding impacting people. And as we're seeing in Ottawa right now, sometimes the flood events that occur exceed what's historically happened. And so it's of utmost importance that we continue to invest in managing floods and in updating the information that we use to manage these floods. Conservation authorities are nonpartisan professional organizations working on a watershed basis to conserve, restore, develop, and manage natural resources, including water. So just for anybody in the room who doesn't know what a watershed is or might not understand what a watershed is, a watershed is the area of land that feeds into a river or a lake, and you can think of it as a vessel or an irregularly shaped bowl where any water that falls within that vessel flows towards the river. I like to think of it in terms of the eaves troughs on your house. So water that falls on certain parts of your roof will flow into one eaves trough. Water that falls on a different part of your roof flows into a different eaves trough. The same way that water that falls in the landscape flows into different rivers. Those basins are watersheds. So conservation authorities work on a watershed basis with this transcends municipal boundaries. And the benefit of that is that ultimately water flows downstream. So what happens in an upstream municipality affects what happens in a downstream municipality. Some of the services that conservation authorities provide to mitigate flood are we monitor floods. So we look at the watershed. We look at the rainfall that's coming. We look at the watershed, the stream levels. We look at the snow on the landscape and the soil conditions. And so we can use this data to know when floods are going to hit and how bad these floods are going to be. And what we do with this data is we pass it on to our municipalities' emergency management people, so that if a flood's going to hit your municipality, you know before it happens, you know if people need to be evacuated, or you know what needs to happen. Other things we do is we regulate development. So I'm fully aware that development regulations can be seen as a barrier to development sometimes, but the reality of it is it's actually a very quick and cost-effective means of ensuring development occurs safely. So it's a lot easier to deal with the issue beforehand than to deal with it after the fact. We also offer other programs and services that help reduce flood risk. We protect wetlands, which regulate flood flows. We plant trees, which slow runoff. We own and operate flood control structures. We own and manage floodplain areas. We partner with municipalities on erosion control structures, and we educate people about flooding and flood risks. But despite this important work that conservation authorities do, we're facing, as I mentioned, budget cuts associated with the very flood work that we do. So prior to 1996, conservation authorities across the province received $50 million in funding from the province as a transfer payment to look after flood monitoring, flood prediction, and flood-related structures. In 1996, that funding was cut back to $7.4 million across 36 conservation authorities. Grace Sauble's share of that was $72,000 and has remained at that since '96. So it's effectively been being cut by the cost of inflation every year since. This spring, we received a letter from the province that the funding was going to be reduced by a further 50%, and this affected all conservation authorities across the province. So that $7.4 million is now in the range of $3.7 million across 36 conservation authorities to provide a major public safety service that the province themselves has recognized as an issue, especially what we're seeing going on in the Muskokas and Ottawa and outside of the province of Ontario right now. So we can understand that the province has a desire to reduce the deficit. That's fully understandable. But Grace Sauble in particular, and most conservation authorities, have run very lean for a very long time, especially since these 1996 cuts. And we feel that further cuts are not supportable. We do have about 29 staff in our office. It's a bit of a fluctuating number with contract staff. But of those, it's essentially one person, John, that deals with flood monitoring with support from other staff and from field staff. So when we start to think about 50% cut, so we're talking about $35,000, $36,000 for Grace Sauble. In the big picture, that might not seem like a lot, but when you're talking about a department of one, really, it does start to make a big difference. So prior to these cuts happening, Grace Sauble has recently done a strategic plan, and part of that strategic plan recognized that we need to add more expertise in this area. So ideally, we'd like to bring on a water resources engineer or a water scientist. In the face of the recent cuts, that's going to be increasingly difficult. So we don't understand why the province would cut funding to this program at a time when climate change uncertainty is increasing, when floods are occurring more and more frequently, and when they're also putting out a piece of regulation that's asking conservation authorities to focus on their core mandate that includes natural hazard management. So the quote that you have in front of you right now is a quote from the Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry not even a month ago. It was taken from an article, I believe it was CBC, and in the Muskokas. And the second half of this quote states, on average, provincial funding accounts for less than 10% of a conservation authority's overall budget. This reduction will not interfere with the core programs that conservation authorities are mandated to provide and Ontarians depend on. We respectfully disagree. From this, it appears to us that the province either doesn't understand or they're not aware that in rural communities, every dollar counts. We don't have the same tax base as larger urban centers, and so every tax dollar that we have has to go further. So when a provincial funding cut like this comes in, it means a lot to smaller municipalities like ours. For Grace Sauble, if we were to divert this money from different programs, that means that we would have, it could impact our children's education programming, our recreational dam management like the Mill Dam, stewardship, water quality testing, and more. So we feel that from the provincial budget perspective, it's a drop in the bucket. The $4 million that have been cut across the province for conservation authorities is not even 100% of the provincial budget. However, we believe that the business case for them to continuing to provide this money is strong, because emergency management for floods is expensive, but emergency management for floods where you had no forewarning and no mitigation is substantially more expensive. So like our municipalities, we're also dealing with other budget cuts that will affect the authority. These include the elimination of the 50 million tree planting subsidy, which is a program provided through this subsidy by the Grace Sauble Conservation Authority that allowed landowners to plant trees on their properties. I believe it was about a 75% subsidy for landowners, so that is no more. Our ability to utilize provincial funding for summer jobs has been eliminated. And there was a project entitled the South Georgian Bay Coastal Initiative, which was looking at the current state and the health of South Georgian Bay, and also setting a baseline for that. Grace Alba was undertaking that work for $30,000 a year over a 3-year period. That's been eliminated as well. So the other item that I wanted to mention is the changes that are proposed to the legislation. So there are 2 changes on the environmental registry right now. One has to do with Conservation Authority's development regulation, and we really have no objection to the proposals that are being proposed to the development regulation. We think they're fitting, and we're just going to be providing detail or comments on the details of that. What we are more concerned about is the piece of legislation or a proposal called Modernizing Conservation Authority Operations. And this goes hand in hand with the recently released Bill 108, which encompasses a large breadth of legislation, but it also includes the Conservation Authorities Act. So what this proposal proposes is to limit Conservation Authority's core mandate to natural hazard protection and management, the management and conservation of Conservation Authority-owned lands, and source water protection. What that means is that all of the other programs that conservation authorities provide right now on a watershed level and determined by a municipally appointed watershed board made up of members of Owen Sound Council and other member municipality councils, each of those other programs that we operate that falls outside of these 3 would have to occur with an individual agreement with each individual municipality. So not only is this a huge administrative burden to set up the transition plans and the agreements with each municipality, but it also detracts from the watershed basis that conservation authorities were formed on. So like I had said at the beginning, for a city like Owen Sound, what this means is that if water quality is important to the city and stewardship is important to the city, if these items aren't occurring in upstream communities like Chatsworth or Georgian Bluffs or Meaford, it's very hard for the city to say improve water quality when your neighbors upstream might not be interested in doing so. So we don't know that that's the case, but it certainly opens the door for that to be the case. Reducing the potential here to reduce the levy dollars that the Conservation Authority receives in the watershed scale approach also affects our ability to leverage funds from other sources. So right now, Grace Alba's budget is made up of about 42% municipal levy. 44% of our budget is made up of self-generated funds, and the other less than 10% or 10% or so is made up of grants and donations. So what that means is that we're leveraging our levy dollars at a rate of more than 2 to 1 to bring in self-generated dollars. So some of this is done through partnering with other agencies, some of it's done by applying through grants. So we do have a concern that if there's a reduction in levy dollars for those programs that fall outside of the government's identified core mandate, that it could affect our ability to leverage further monies. So what we're asking for is we're asking for council's support in both asking the province to reinstate the funding that they've cut to flood management, and also to provide supportive comment on the environmental registry in support of keeping the watershed-based levying abilities and management abilities of the Conservation Authority the way they are today. So there's a proposed motion that we respectfully request that council consider. I won't read all the whereas clauses, as there are quite a few of them. Essentially, each one goes through and highlights the items that I just mentioned. The that clauses that we're proposing are that the City of Owen Sound recognize the value of the work provided by conservation authorities, support the current multi-municipality governance model for the selection of programs, and the current municipal levying approach that includes annual input from local municipal councils. And that Owen Sound recommends that the province acknowledge a strong and positive provincial role in flood risk reduction programs and reinstate the funding to CAs. And that city staff be directed to provide a copy of this resolution to the Environmental Registry before the May 20th deadline, as well as to Minister Bill Walker and Minister Lisa Thompson. That should read MPPs, Bill Walker and MPP Lisa Thompson. The Ministers of the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, the Ministry of Finance, the Premier, AMO, Roma, OSUM, and Conservation Ontario. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Kepke.
Just a few comments. Thank you, Tim, for your presentation. It was very good. Hope that didn't blast everybody's ears out. The thing that bothers me is the emergency management supports that won't happen, the municipal planning, zoning development input activities that are currently given by the Conservation Authority, concerns of natural heritage, natural hazards, and so on, and development of all these municipal agreements. That will put the onus on the municipality to work with conservation authorities, of course, to develop these agreements or memorandums of understanding, but somebody's got to pay for all of this, and it likely will end up with the municipality, and a lot of it won't get done. You did have an attachment with your presentation for council, and I wonder if you could just highlight how these are affected on this little chart that you've got.
Sure. Thank you, through your worship. You do, yeah, as Councillor Kepke mentioned, we did provide a handout to council that shows the different programs that Grace Auble provides. And essentially what this diagram shows is which programs we think would fall under those provincially core programs and which programs would not, as well as which have an MOU with the municipalities today and which do not. But essentially, our regulatory role would still continue to fall under a core mandate. Source water protection, which is currently 100% funded by the provincial government, but may be transferred down to levy, is one of the core mandated items. Flood and erosion control structures and the conservation and management of our own properties are all identified as core structures. From a land use planning perspective, natural hazards is a provincially designated role or delegated role. Natural heritage commons, we already have agreements with our municipalities, and we would hope to continue to have those agreements with our municipalities. So the items that really become questionable are where does flood forecasting fall? Is it specifically a natural hazard management role, or does it fall half and half? Our other dams, certainly like the Mill Dam, it becomes questionable because we don't operate that as a flood control structure. We operate that as a recreational structure. And as I had mentioned, stewardship, water quality, those items would fall into limbo somewhat. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Also, I'm hoping that at some point we will receive something from staff that highlights the effect that this will have on our municipality. And I would, Your Worship, like to move the motion that's being proposed.
Okay, so that is moved. Councillor Tamming?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to the motion. I just have a couple questions. You mentioned, Tim, we've never met, but thank you for being here. You wake up every morning and you do a good thing for this community, and I know John quite well, and I appreciate all the effort you do. That said, you mentioned a drop in the bucket, and so I'm going to ask you about that vis-a-vis the provincial province. But for your own budget, you have a budget of $3 million and change, correct, operating? That is correct. About $2 million and 2.1 is salaries?
Sorry, I don't know that off the top of my head.
What percentage does this $36,000 cut represent to your $3 million budget? Would it surprise you to know it's about 1%?
No, that's exactly what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess my concern is, and this goes to the bigger issues that I think council is going to be forced to address with this new government in Toronto. Public health, I suspect, will be here in a few weeks saying similar things. You know, we do important things, don't cut us. You're doing the same thing to here, and I respect what you're doing, and you're doing it with integrity, but it's a 1% cut. And I think any organization should be able to absorb that with a reallocation of resources. That's my position. I don't know if it's possible. I know Marion or Councillor Kepke moved it already. I could move the first motion and the third, but I can't move a motion to reinstate the cut under the circumstances. So I don't know if it's possible to break up, Tim, your motions and deal with them in a series.
The procedure would be we would vote on the motion that's on the floor, and if it doesn't pass, then we could relook at it.
Okay, thank you.
Others who wish to speak to the matter? Councillor Gregg?
I guess I would echo some of those comments, in acknowledging that the libraries has been impacted, and like you say, the health unit. This is a transfer payment that has been unchanged since '96, and at this point, the government's still saying you are to fulfill those same obligations. We're not giving you the freedom now to really choose, yes, I want to do this, or take part in it, or no, I don't. We're essentially just being downloaded the same requirements to fulfill it, and we're looking for the province to maintain that responsibility as opposed to coming back down to the levy, because until we get that freedom to choose, well, we choose not to do it, we won't see that savings for the taxpayer locally. We'll just have to pass it on. It's tough to get around that part of it. There is other parts to it. You've raised excellent points. I guess the education component is one that jumps right out, where it's been mentioned by a former board member. We don't benefit the same way as Owen Sound locally with your daycare programs. So can we grow the resource so that we can all benefit? And that speaks to the larger cohesive management of this board. We have some concerns that some of this is being driven from what was a dysfunctional conservation authority in the Niagara region, and it underwent an extensive review and significant recommendations on the poor management and oversight that was going on with that conservation authority. It's been a little unclear as to why some of these peripheral things are being mentioned, but I'll support the motion because I do recognize your legitimate concerns there on the funding. But this is still something that we are not being provided an obligation to decrease the service. We really have that same responsibility at this point.
Well, nothing prevents us from finding 1% elsewhere, correct, Councillor Gregg?
He's not under cross-examination,
No.
Councillor Tam. Anyone else wish to speak to it? Seeing none, Mr. Lanthea. Oh, yep, sorry, Councillor Thomas, you're next. I was just about to go to you, honest.
Yes, I could tell, so I thought I'd help you out there. I'd like to thank Tim for the presentation. I think it's very interesting for those of us who have been around long enough. We remember the gutting of the conservation authorities about 30 years ago, and to me it's some kind of miracle that they remain in operation. To Councillor Tamming's point, you know, I think in the presentation we heard that this program has been eroding by the cost of living every single year since the last time it was updated. So it is more than a 1% hit that's being taken. From my perspective, I see this as nothing more than provincial downloading by another name. I said the same thing about the library cuts. This is a program that we're going to end up funding if we do not take action now. And so I'm in support of the motion, Your Worship.
Good, thank you. Mr. Lanthea, Skinner attended Grey County the other day. This motion is the same with the exception that it applied to Grey Sauble and to Saugeen. Am I correct on that?
That is correct, yes.
And that was passed unanimously up at Grey County?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, okay. Just for information. So I see no other comments. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? I've got you, thanks. So, sorry, put your hands up again. That knocked me off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, plus Richard is 7, plus I'm 8 opposed. Councillor Tamming is opposed, so that carries. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I hazard to guess that we've probably got one of the better, more successful conservation authorities in the province with the amount of land that's been acquired, that's been pulled together, the waterworks, everything that has gone on. A few years ago, I was on the Conservation Authority as a member of council, and we had the, was it a biannual? I can't remember. It was each Conservation Authority hosts, and we got to tour the entire area with Saugeen and see people from other conservation authorities from all over the province come in, and they were, just to hear their comments and how impressed they are with our Grey Sauble Conservation Authority and the Saugeen Conservation Authority was interesting. So you do get that feedback, so that's good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the support.
So 9B on our deputation is Mr. Robbins with the Ramoka Shrine Club. Welcome.
Make sure I get this right, Your Worship. Thank you very much. I'd like to defaz if I could, and I'm going to bring this up to you.
I've seen one of those before.
No, hold on one second. Through Your Worship, just a little bit of house cleaning first, if we could, through Your Worship, okay? Okay, we're going to have the video go here in a few minutes, but don't start my time, please. Okay. We just finished our walk for water, and I have some final tallies. And there again, I'd like to thank Pam Coulter and the City of Owen Sound for letting us start our walk right at the front. That was very generous, and we'll be coming back again next year to do that as well. So thank you very much. Richard Thomas, he was videotaping Councillor O'Leary. Excuse me? Someone's talking to me. I thought they were talking to me, Your Worship. But yeah, it was a great day. We raised $100,661.
A lot of money.
Okay. O-Share, the food kitchen, $78,889. Okay. So, you know, the rest goes to Madagascar, Walk for Water, WaterAid Canada. So there again, I'd like to thank everyone that helped us out, all the councillors that sponsored us, Mr. Tammy, Marion Kepke. I know the councillors at Travis Dodd, you know, all of you were very helpful in getting us to that number. So I thank you very much.
Well, congratulations to you and all the fundraisers on that. Well done.
Thank you very much. So, now, this is why we're here tonight. The Ramoka Shrine Club in 1976 was founded, and your father, Mr. Jim Boddy, was our first president. So that's why, Your Worship, I put my fez up by you, okay? A lot of people didn't realize that, but that's exactly what happened. I was just informed tonight that we were part of the Collingwood Shrine Club, and a group of the Shriners, the nobles, from Owen Sound decided to start their own. So, without further ado, what we're here tonight for is to get support for the 38th annual golf tournament. We know there's a few councillors that are going to give us signs. We're selling signs for $100, $500, and $1,000. That's the first thing, and we're asking the public for different businesses out there for prizes that we could auction off that day. Okay, and as part of a silent auction. I know Mr. Tamming is in line for a $500 sign. Mr. O'Leary, Councillor O'Leary, I know you're in line for probably a $1,000 sign. So I thank you very much for that. There's a fellow in this room right now, Mr. Barry Kusselbrink, okay, who bought $1,000. He already gave us a check for $1,000, and we're going to get more from him. Okay. So, Aveda Corporation, okay, the corporation that helped the Walk for Water, again, gave us $1,000. Hobart's, we just learned, Hobart's, because of Noble Lloyd Stewart, and I'm going to talk about Lloyd in a minute, gave us a $500 sign this year. So that's where we make a lot of our money, is through our signs, and we make a little bit of money off the golfing, and I know Councillor Tamming, Councillor O'Leary, again, you two are golfing that day, and maybe Councillor Todd, and maybe our city manager. I talked, you know, maybe we can get him, okay, maybe the mayor as well. But we didn't know, you two actually have confirmed, but everyone else, we need confirmation. Maybe Brock Hampley, maybe Marion, maybe Carol, maybe Scott, maybe our Director of Community Ops Services, and your mayor. Maybe we could all support, you know. So before further ado, one more thing, we made $27,000 profit last year for the Shrine Hospital, and without delay, we're going to look at this, please. Everyone at home will see this too as well, this little video?
I assume so.
If we could start it?
I don't know, I'm here, I don't know what it
Do I
looks
press the
like.
button here? Okay, do I just press that one? Okay, so there it goes there now.
We take care of kids of all ages, from babies right up to 21, who have problems with their muscles or bones or joints. The doctors, the physiotherapists, the conditional therapists, everybody has in mind to give the best of the best for their children.
Their families, they're absolutely like families. Cardinals, all their names. They know him, they know him with open arms, big hugs, almost tears when you leave. It's pretty neat.
To work in Schweiner's hospital is a privilege. There is nothing more motivating than seeing a child and then treat him and then
Each specialty is really very involved in care of the patient. You realize that as you come together, you're not dealing with your own specialty, you're really dealing with the patient. Therefore, you're able to really optimize that care.
here, the technique is being performed by those people that have actually developed it. I mean, these are the go-to people.
The care here is absolutely outstanding because of the expertise of our staff and because of our family-centered approach, where families are real partners in the care of our children.
You really have to be understanding and realize what the kids are going through, what the families are going through, and how complicated their lives are.
So you have to take into account, including the family, all of the decisions and all of the steps in your journey towards getting more healthy.
And his first steps were out here, and it was the confidence that his physiotherapist Stephanie had in him, that he would be able to actually take those steps and to walk, and it was just the best feeling.
I've shed many tears downstairs in the physiotherapy room. You can ask any of the people that have been in when I was little, and they're difficult, but it's really going to be worth it in the end, and it's only to make you more robust, and to make you stronger, so you continue on.
Our philosophy in the classroom is all things are difficult when you start out with, but then they become so easy and so natural. We believe in what the Shriners do. We believe in this hospital. We believe that, and we see the results.
It may be difficult to look ahead and into the future of a child, but I think definitely it will be bright, and with the help of the people at the Shriners, the child will live a very fulfilling life, and can turn out to be a wonderful person and
If they're able to not take their life too seriously in light of very serious limitations, I'm looking for minor limitations.
And to have some place like the Shriners Hospital to come to, and to know that there's a place where we can bring him, and he'll always get the help that he needs. It's really amazing.
That was great. Unbelievable. Thank you very much to Jarrett Ron from Imprint Guy. He's one of our candidates coming up here. He's going to be put into the Shrine in June, and that was very good of him to make that up for all of us. That video is from Montreal. We have 22 hospitals throughout North America, and our goal this year, I said earlier, 27,000 was a profit. We'd like to get 75,000. Because that money, that money goes, some of it will go directly to the hospital in Montreal, but some of it goes also to our transportation fund, okay? Like I said earlier, Noble Lloyd Stewart is in the, Lloyd, could you stand up for a sec so everyone, Lloyd and his team, Noble Rennie, our president, actually, Ron Blewett, and actually Noble Wayne Cole, they travel, okay, they will pick the child up and the parent at their home, okay? They'll take them down to the Bradford train station, and from there, they'll be put on the train, and there'll be another Shriner, because you know the Fez, everyone knows the Fez. The family will be looking for that Shriner in Montreal train station, and from there, they're taken to the hospital, okay? There's one little girl, she's done 54 round trips. 6 years.
Going to get you to come over to the microphone because it's not being picked up, so people at home aren't hearing you, and I think this is important.
Yes, the one young lady, it's the Meaford, extra bones, a bone disorder. She's a twin. She has extra bones in her toes, in her legs, in her knees, in her hips, in her fingers. She's had, I think, 5 operations. She still needs 3 more operations for sure. And the big debate right now is if they're going to do her 2 toes and in her hand at the same time. As you know, the nerves at the very end of your body are the most critical as far as soreness, so that's the decision now. We're waiting for word within the next 2 or 3 weeks. The other young girl has had, I think it was 38 round trips, same age. For some reason, seems to have more young ladies than men with bone disorders and what have you. But we had 9 children at one time. We're down to 7. And probably over the last 10 years since I've been involved, we probably have had close to 400 round trips right here in Owen Sound in the area. We've got a child in Meaford, 3 in Owen Sound, 1 in Peabody, 1 in Williamsford, and I just can't recall the other, maybe Hepworth. But we had 9. I think our club, even though we're small, we're one of the most dynamic clubs with regard of getting out and helping children. The best thing of all, we're there for the child. It doesn't matter about the financial situation. If the only time we ever collect any money is if we can piggyback if they've got existing insurance. But other than that, there's no cost from the time they leave Owen Sound. And some of these families have portfolios 3-4 inches thick from the time the child was born until they're at the ages. And we have our children right now from 6 years old, but they did start when they're 3, and our oldest is 21. But and it's very rewarding of what we can do if we get them in time.
Good. Thank you very much.
See, isn't that beautiful? You know what I'm saying? So tonight, even, before we go any further, you know, if you want to give us some money, we'll take it tonight. You know what I mean? Like that's, you know, all the people out there, you know, if they want to drop their prizes off at Main Street Hair Salon, we'll take them. They'll be auctioned off. It's going to be a beautiful day. All right? And if you can envision all, before we get started, Sam at Legacy Ridge Golf Course, he introduces a little girl or a little boy that comes up before everyone goes out, and she tells a story. All right? She tells a story, or he tells a story of what happened at the Shriner Hospital. All right? And I say to everyone that's there, this is the reason why we do this. This is the reason why we collect the money and we raise the money is for these kids. Okay? It's plain and simple. All right? And you have a whole group of Shriners. You know, we have a great golf committee. All right? And the committee, we all help out. These fellas here, I got to thank them tonight. We've been through, you know, I told them it'd only be 10 minutes.
You told us that, too.
Okay, so, so, like I say, the way you want to help, if you want to become a Shriner, first of all, in closing your worship, you become a Mason first, and then you go through the stages, and I can't say too much about what happens there, but then you can become a Shriner. So there are people, young people out there, older people out there that want to become Shriners, we will help you out. If you want to, if you know of a family in need, okay, if you know of a family in need that maybe needs our support, right now we have 7 families that we look after. We will take applications for that as well, okay? And like I say, our goal this year is $75,000 profit, and I think with the help of the council, you know, with the help of the general public out there, we can meet those goals. And remember, it's kids that need our help, and this is why we do it. So in closing, I'd like to really thank the council for taking the time. We will be back next year. This is a great forum for us to be able to show the public, show the people of Owen Sound, the people of the area, what we do and how we do it. All right? And you don't have to be a Shriner. You do not have to have anything except the will to help people in need. That's all we're looking for. All right? And I'll tell you one thing too, Councillor Tammy, you're looking at me there. We have a lot of fun doing it. All right? So if any of you councillors want to become a Shriner, and remember, it's just not us, our wives, our ladies are part of the whole situation. So I think my 10 minutes is up. Mr. Councillor O'Leary, The deputy mayor is looking at me like I am done, so I'd like to thank you again, and thank you to all my fellow nobles. It's been great.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins. Just while you're, go ahead, you have a question.
I have no question. I just want to send my sincere, I don't even know, my gratitude to both the Shriners that have, obviously this is a program, I'll be honest, I'm a Kiwanian, and I know what we do, and I know what the Rotary Club does, but this is a very informative lesson to find out what the Shriners do and how many lives they impact. So thank you all for those services that you do. I know you're all busy individuals. I recognize a lot of the faces that I'm seeing, and I know you all are very, very busy. And to know what you do outside of that, you all deserve a pat on the back, and everyone in this community needs to be very proud of you. So thank you for what you do. Mr. Krusbrink as well, and Jeff, I appreciate that the update on the $100,000. It's amazing. I congratulate both of you the last time you were here, and you guys also deserve that. Congratulations again, because once again, you're helping an OSHARE, which is a very tremendous organization here in the city. And once again, you'll be helping it greatly for the people that are in need. So July 5th, your golf tournament. What time does it start? Where is it? Obviously, Legacy Ridge.
Legacy Ridge. It's 18 holes. You get a pregame lunch. It's $140. The registration starts at 11:30. You get 18 holes of golf and cart, and then we have dinner and prizes at the end. If you only want to come for dinner, it's $35. But there is limited spacing. I know that last year we sold out, and we will sell out again this year, and it's a lot of fun. Be a lot of fun.
So if you want to sign up?
If you want to sign up, come over and see me at the hair salon, or just, you can get our phone number off our website, the Ramoka Shrine Club website, and Noble Jason Gow will get back to you, because he monitors that.
Good.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks to all of you. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Oh, go ahead.
Just a quick question. If people wanted to just donate to your cause, how do they do that?
Oh, that's not an issue. You can make the check out to Ramoka Shrine Club of Owen Sound, and you can drop it off at the hair salon, Noble Ron Todd's office, an investors group, Jarrett Ron, he's going to be our new, I'm just thinking of different places, DC Taylor, there's Mr. Creighton Taylor sitting in the audience. You didn't really notice him, but there he is. DC Taylor Jewelry, you could drop it off there. Even McDonnell Fuels. McDonnell Fuels is sitting right here. Steve McDonnell. You could drop it off at him too. So we would really appreciate anything that we can. Yes. Excuse me? Or the website. Shriners Hospital, right? So yes, all donations we'll take.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Just go ahead, you can turn that off. That's good. Just while you're grabbing your fez, I can tell you guys that back, I remember being woken in the middle of the night, not the middle of the night, before midnight, by three loud gentlemen at the kitchen table who had been over to Collingwood. And I know Grant Gillespie is one, and I think Fred McFall is the other one. It might have been Fred Fowler at the time, and my dad were having this discussion that they needed to start their own shrine club, and it was getting louder and more excited as the evening went on. They picked Ramoka being part of Mocha from London and Ramesses from Toronto, of course, putting both names together. Between grade 12 and grade 13, I went out and spent the summer in Jasper with my brother who was in the RCMP, and my parents showed up out of the blue to pick me up to bring me back home at the end of the school year. Now, I thought they're coming for me. We stopped at the hospital in Winnipeg. That was the reason my dad came out. He wanted to go to that hospital. I don't know if there's still one there, if it's just Montreal now, but at that time it was Winnipeg and Montreal, and that was the reason to go. So he was a Shriner his entire life from early 70s on, and he had great friends right across the province because of that, as I'm sure you guys do. So thank you very much for everything you do. Thanks. So at 9C, Mr. Kafalis, you've got a deputation.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to give you an update on this on the Downtown River Precinct construction project. What's happened over the last 2 weeks. We started off by pulverizing all the asphalt and left it in place to ensure we can maintain a tidy site. We started laying water main, and needless to say, we ran into a bell structure that was much larger than anticipated, and we were in close proximity, so it took us some unique engineering design to get around it, which we've done. We've removed the pavilion, 90% of the pavilion, and the concrete pad that once supported the pavilion. We left a little portion in place, which will require a little additional care because it is connected to the downtown market building itself. We've had to remove 3 mature jack pines to accommodate a storm scepter. We initially thought we'd get by it, but once we started getting close proximity and noticed the root bulbs around the trees, we consulted with our manager of parks, Adam Parsons, to see if there's any possible way to save these trees. There wasn't. We'd removed too much of the root bulbs, which would leave the tree that was unsafe and eventually fall over, so it's better to be proactive than reactive. And as of Friday, we are still on schedule. In terms of communication, we did a segment on Grey County Living to inform the residents of the project and let people know that the farmers market is still open for business, as is Red Hot's, and we said it's a unique situation where we're trying to maintain businesses in this area during this construction process. We've tried to keep the parking lot open as much as possible at City Hall, and again, we can't really close off the site in its entirety, so you'll see a lot of gawkers making their way through the site, so it's a pretty unique situation. We also have a booth set up at the farmers market to help inform people of the project, and that's been very successful and well attended over the last 2 weekends.
Good. Any Hemlock piping yet?
Not yet.
Anyone else have questions? Councillor Thomas, questions?
No, sir.
Good, thank you. Anyone else? Good, thank you very much, Dennis. Public question period. Anyone have a question to ask? Seeing none. Number 11 is correspondence received, which we need to make a decision on. This is with the On Sound DIA Board of Management with regard to daily parking passes. Comments, presentations? Mr. Ritchie?
This would be housekeeping, I believe. Is that correct, Ethan? So if someone would move this, we can start the process of actually going forward with our $5 daily parking pass.
Okay, so Councillor Kepke.
Thank you, Worship. I do have a motion contained in the report that I would like to pass, although, am I to do the other one first?
Just that motion.
Okay. The motion that I have is that in consideration of correspondence dated May 13 from Owen Sound DIA, respecting a daily parking pass, City Council directs staff to provide notice of the city's intention to amend the fees and charges bylaw to include a $5 fee for a daily parking pass and bring forward a report and bylaw for consideration at the May 27 council meeting so that the passes can be available for June.
Okay. Any questions? Councillor Thomas?
No, sir.
Good. All in favor?
In favor.
So that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Number 12A, report from city staff with Director of Community Services, Ms. Coulter, with regard to development charges for 2 specific sites.
Thank you, Worship. The city has received 2 requests with respect to extending the development charge holiday to exempt the projects from the payment of the residential development charge. The first was from Barry's Construction and Insulation for the project at 1185 4th Avenue East. That's the 68 residential unit conversion of the former Strathcona School. The second is from Richard Graham, or Graham Design and Construction, 2380 9th Avenue East, and that's a 19-unit leasehold townhouse development. Just as a reminder to Council, to be eligible for the holiday, a building permit was required prior to March 1, 2019, with occupancy by March 1st of 2020. A summary of both applications and the timeline associated with those developments is provided in your report. The link to the city's development charges bylaw is provided, but I would just remind you that There is a section on redevelopment, and if there's a redevelopment, conversion, demolition, or change of use of a building or structure, you can give a credit for the previous use. Section 10 deals with the payment of development charges. Generally, those are payable on the date where a building permit is issued, except, and Section 11 deals with written agreements, and it does authorize council to enter into those written agreements. Under the current bylaw, the applicable charge for each of the developments, the first at 1185 4th Avenue East, 68 units times $3,629 a unit for a total of $246,772. At 2380 9th Avenue East, 19 units at $5,757, or a total of $109,383 for that development. County Council considered a very similar request from the same two developers relating to these same two developments. The counties made a decision to opt for a deferral agreement. The county is going to complete a study with respect to purpose-built rental accommodation. There would be some affordability criteria likely as part of the eligibility requirements. And then once they're done that study, they would amend their bylaw. The deferral will allow for whatever the charge is when these two developments have occupancy, whatever that charge is would be payable at that time. In terms of analysis, both developments have not achieved the timelines required to be eligible for the holiday. So the last day would have been March 1st to have a building permit with occupancy prior to March 1, 2020. The Strathcona development expects to have occupancy hopefully by late December 2020. Sound Lifestyles hopes to have some units by the end of 2019, with the remainder by summer of 2020. We talked about the redevelopment credit, and because it's a former institutional use, there would be no DC fee payable, and therefore it wouldn't qualify for a credit in that way, and that would only apply to the Strathcona. If council wishes to provide any exemption, an agreement with these developers would be required. I've given council several options to consider. The first is that you would require payment of the development charge. Second, you could enter into a deferral agreement with the developer. If council was to select this option, you could choose to have the developer pay the current charge at the time of occupancy, or you could elect to have the amount payable at the time of occupancy as be per the DC bylaw in effect. The county is going to do a separate study. The timing with respect to the conclusion or the end of our current DC bylaw, we're just in the process of evaluating the RFPs for the consultant who will undertake the study for our new bylaw. It would be my recommendation to council, if you were going to study this issue, it would be done as part of that overall development charges study. Option C is to waive the requirement for the development charge, or you could partially waive the requirement, and as I mentioned, that would require an agreement. And option D, and this only applies to Strathcona, would be to provide a credit for the previous building that existed. So I mentioned it didn't meet the technical requirements of the current bylaw because the previous use was institutional. However, this is the approach that was taken with the Green Ridge development, such that each of those units only paid a portion of the development charge based on the historic use of the property. So, Your Worship, the recommendation is that council would receive the report with respect to both requests, and council would provide direction.
If I can ask just a couple of questions before others, if that's okay. We had the last study done, and was it to cover a 4-year period?
Through you, Your Worship, the current DC bylaw started March 1, 2015, and it expires March 1, 2020.
So it's a 5-year period.
There was a 5-year period. During 4 of those years, you had a holiday, and during the last year of the bylaw, the regular DC came into effect.
My recollection is that we went for a holiday for a shorter period of time, maybe 2 years, and then we renewed that. Is that accurate? I'm seeing yes. And is there a reason why it didn't come back again now to get us through, for us to make a decision on a holiday from, I guess, basically that March 1st, 2019 date to the final?
Through your worship, at that time, council had made a decision to have the holiday, and then you made a decision to extend it, and the bylaw, which is Schedule B to the Development Charges bylaw, had that payment in the last year, so it wasn't scheduled to come back.
So it wasn't scheduled to come back for another review. Okay, I couldn't remember. So the next one has to be done by March, basically 2020, and we will start it when?
Through you, your worship, the meeting with the consultant will likely have a kickoff meeting in June, and then followed by a presentation to council.
So sooner than later. Okay, that's that. I just wanted to have my memory refreshed. Thank you. Others? Councillor Martin, you had your hand up.
Through you, your worship, timing is everything. The deadline of the residential holiday under the existing bylaw has passed. We know the provincial government has strategies forthcoming to assist in clearing the way for developers to expedite the planning and permit process, to decrease the time to build more housing. A study to evaluate water and wastewater rates is in the RFP process now and is timed for this year. Since 2015, taxpayers and users of water and wastewater have provided the financial input, and this has supported and the infrastructure around to enable development fees to be waived. We anticipate that the timing of the arrival of the ship we can call growth will be in the next few years. We supported that, we're anticipating, and we are hoping to see the benefits of the waiving of this development fee. However, as I said, timing is everything, and I'm wondering if it is now time to say no to a deferral or an extension, and time to implement the existing bylaw to allow the total of the 2 development fees to be placed into and redirected to the wastewater reserve, $365,000 and $155. If this can be implemented prior to the initiation of the rate study, maybe the anticipated rate hike might be slightly less. It is time to turn the focus and attention back to the taxpayer, the user payer, and those who are paying and subsidizing to reduce the burden they are carrying to sustain the infrastructure costs and build the reserves. We need developers to develop, and we need the infrastructure to support the developments. I think the time has come to change the lens under the principle of fairness and distribution of the resources.
Good. Thank you. Others? Deputy Mayor O'Leary?
Oh, can we have a clarification? There was a request that you're saying that some that
Was there a question there? Sorry, hold on then.
About going into be used for wastewater.
Ms. Allen?
The development charge is calculated based on the different envelopes of services that it funds. So no, you can't take the full development charge and change the distribution outside of this study that it was built on.
But the wastewater reserve depends on development fees for the deficit, based on our conversations, right, Kate?
Correct. Some of the deficit that we are seeing in our wastewater funding plan results from not achieving the development charges that we anticipated in that program.
But just to clarify, don't those development charges have to be spent on future growth?
There are specific projects that they must be spent on, so they must be spent on growth-related projects.
Narrows it. Okay, thank you. Mr. Ritchie, you're...
If I could, Your Worship, and we'd have to double-check this, but I think what the councillor may be suggesting is that the portion that of the development charge that applies to water and wastewater be collected and the other perhaps not be collected. We can do that, we believe.
Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
Thank you, Worship. I would agree somewhat with Councillor Merton, but the timing, you mentioned the timing isn't now. I think because of what we've done with Georgian Landing, we have no choice but to do it with the next two. There is really no difference. I'd be glad to have a conversation about development charges, a small amount of development charges going towards wastewater in the future. But part of that, at least for me, will be rental units is different. And I said it before. Rental units are different because it might be the only opportunity for a councillor or us as a council to help out with affordable housing because of the trickle-down effect. So, you know, if we're just talking about Strathcona School, I wouldn't want development charges with it anyways because it's a rental unit. Richard Graham's is different, but I think from what we've done with Georgian Landing, then we have to do the same here. So I would move that we go with recommendation C, which is to waive the requirement of the development charge.
So motion's on the floor. Councillor Kepke, you had your hand up.
Yes, I did. I just wanted to ask staff if they could tell us the portion that would be applicable to wastewater. I understand water already has a surplus. Is that correct? It's wastewater that's the issue.
Perhaps Your Worship, Ms. Allen will answer the first part and perhaps Ms. Colquitt the second. Is that all right?
Fine.
The wastewater charge for an apartment unit is $356 a unit. So that would be, sorry,
Times
356 times 68. That would be $24,208. For the other development, it would be $564 because it's a townhouse type, although it is a rental, times 19 units would be $10,716. And then there is also a separate water rate, but I think Ms. Allen will answer your question on water.
Sorry, the question was, we have a deficit in wastewater, but not in water. Currently, wastewater is in a financial deficit, that's correct. But that relates to the service as a whole, not to growth-related investments.
Correct, but water has a surplus.
Yes, in the same circumstance. As far as growth-related or as far as the service as a whole, it is financially stable at this point in time. But that's not addressing where the water development charge reserve is.
Okay, so when we do address development charges, we can pick and choose the pockets they go into. Is that correct?
At the time, the study determines how those development charges are calculated based on what our growth-related investment needs are identified at the time of the study. So there's a calculation that determines how much of each development charge is allocated to each service. Beyond that point in time, we don't have the ability to change the distribution of those funding envelopes.
Thank you. I do agree with Deputy Mayor O'Leary, though, that we've already started this process with some other developers, and I think we need to stick to what we're doing.
Councillor Tamming, then I'm going to go to Councillor Thomas.
Director Coulter, I thank you very much for the excellent presentation. I like the timelines in particular. They're very useful. I missed something, though. Strathcona is projected to start occupancy in December or September of 2020.
Through your worship, based on information provided by the developer, I think they expect occupancy in December of 2020.
And Graham's units, maybe the summer of 2020?
Some units, end of this year, 2019, they've applied for 3 permits, with the remainder of 16 by the summer of 2020.
Okay. Your worship, I'll support the motion. I think a delay of 5 or 8 months is not egregious. and the longer 8-month wait, because you're supposed to be occupied by March of 2020, is my understanding. So essentially, we're looking at an 8-month delay. Very complex building, very big building, nice to see something going into it, so I'll support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor, go ahead. Councillor Thomas, anything to add?
Yes, Your Worship. I certainly support the motion. I think that we have set a precedent over the past number of years regarding development charges. I think that we're going to have a chance next year to study those charges and to really look at how development charges are allocated, collected, and used in our community. I'll use the example of the library. We collect development charges for the library, but the library has never been able to access that money and likely never will be able to access it because it is impossible to prove growth-related issues. So I think we need to look at the entire development charge, and I'm content with continuing on the track that we've taken in the meantime. To Councillor Merton's comment about putting the focus back on the taxpayers, I would submit that our focus has always been on the taxpayers and remains on the taxpayers all through this process. You know, when we started first discussing the development charges, there was very little building in Owen Sound. And we know as a council that one of the ways that you improve things for your taxpayers is by building assessment. You know, the more assessment we have coming into our community, the better it's going to be for all of the taxpayers. So I would say that our focus has always been on the taxpayers through this process, and so I support the motion.
Thank you. Anyone down there? Councillor Dodd, Councillor Gregg. Councillor Gregg, go ahead.
Well, thanks, Mayor Body, and thanks, Councillor Merton, for your work there. You raised some very good points, and I quite like the train of thought there. I think what we did, I guess maybe it was in February, but I think we already set the stage for tonight, I think, with that decision on Georgian Landing. So this is an opportunity for us to, all development charges get passed along. I mean, that's not kidding anyone. I'm totally in agreement with the Deputy Mayor. This is something that would affect people who are somewhat rent sensitive in the community. And as well, we all know how important that transitional seniors housing is. And this project's going to be a start or a continuation of fulfilling a need to get people out of century homes and into that next stage of living in our community. So I'm in full support of the motion. You know, I think back, I'm going to echo the Brockton Mayor, Chris Peabody, in February, who spoke against or spoke for their council's decision not to undertake a development charge study at all, because their opinion was there's no appetite for development charges in that community. They only had 14 houses of growth, and they saw it as a detraction to further growth. So I'm not in favor of or I am in favor of waiving the development charges in this case.
Okay. So I'll just call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Councillor Thomas?
In favor.
Good, thanks.
Your Worship, if I could, was there any limit to timing at all on the end of that, or could you perhaps have that motion read, if you don't mind? Any occupancy, I guess. That'd be the question we have as staff. Then.
Through your worship, in other agreements, council has provided a deadline for occupancy in order for the deferral or the waiver to take effect. So in this case, if council wants that included in the agreement, we would take your direction on that.
Deputy Mayor O'Leary, any thoughts? Your motion?
Yeah, kind of put me on the spot. I don't. If we go with what the developers is predicting, I mean, that would be the easy way. But if they don't meet the deadline,
Your Worship, just a suggestion you might put in December 31st of 2020. We will certainly work with both developers, and if there are challenges along the way to it being occupied, we'll be back with a further report. And that at least allows us to have an agreement.
That's a great idea. I'll add December 31st, 2020 to that motion.
Okay, so anyone opposed to that amendment of the motion? You're hesitating, yes? No?
I'm just wondering, what did we do with Georgian Landing? I presume there was a precedent set there with a timeline.
Through your worship, the deadline for occupancy is actually December 31st, 2019.
Which was their deadline, as they said. Councillor Thomas, you're okay with that amendment?
Yes, sir.
Good, thank you. Now, apparently I misnoted you voted against that, so there was, Councillor Merton was opposed to that, otherwise it was carried. So now if we can go to 12B, Ms. Bloomfield, with regard to a application for encroachment agreement.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Clerk's Office received an application for an encroachment agreement respecting property at 1898 3rd Avenue West for a fence along the rear of the property and a wood platform on the north side of the property. The applicant also provided a justification report, which has been attached to the staff report. The application and justification report were circulated to various city departments for comment, and staff are recommending that City Council deny the application. The reason for this is as follows. The wooden platform is built over a catch basin which impedes access to city infrastructure and prevents staff from being able to identify problems with runoff during heavy rain events. The wooden platform does not allow for quick and easy access when needed most. In building the wooden platform, grading changes were made that negatively affect surface runoff and water storage characteristics of the city boulevard. Any above-grade decking on the subject lands proposed to abut the lot line would have a 0-meter setback, which does not meet the requirement of the zoning bylaw. The fence posts are built on city property, and should the fence boards be put up on the fence, it will be located over top of a catch basin that also impedes timely access to city infrastructure. Had the applicant contacted the city prior to building on city property, staff would have indicated at that time that the fence and wood platform would not be permitted on city property. And there's also no compelling reason to keep the fence and wood platform on city property. And with that, I can answer any questions you may have, or I may also defer to my colleagues for any more technical questions.
Councillor Dodd?
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a couple questions. I'm not sure who will be answering them, the Director of Community Services or potentially the Director of Operations. Within that report, it notes that there's other encroachments of fences in that same area. So I'm just wondering, how is this, the applicant's location, any different?
Thank you for the question, through Your Worship. In terms of something like this, I mean, in this specific case, we're talking about a fence that's we've been made aware of, that we've had issues with, and it's been brought to our attention. When we talk about other fences, I mean, usually these things are complaint-driven. So when we have received a staff member actually noticed this and it came to our attention, we had to address it to see what the impacts would be on our infrastructure. In the case of adjacent properties, we would look at it if it came as part of a complaint and whether it would have the same impact. But on the adjacent properties in this area, they aren't in close proximity to our catch basin, so they don't pose as much of a, I guess, a hindrance. But again, if there was a complaint generated for those properties, we'd have to address it.
And there's the wooden deck over that basin, and if that was removed, there's also noted in there that there was a potential for a safety concern for pedestrians. What's your viewpoint? Or the city's engineering viewpoint?
Well, in this case, in that specific area, that there was a guardrail put up along the sidewalk to ensure people don't tumble into the drainage ditch or onto the catch basin. So whether or not that's what we did to address any potential safety issue associated with that catch basin in that area.
Okay, thank you. I still have two more questions. The applicant noted that he inquired about a permit for a deck. So what are the city's rulings on fencing?
Through Your Worship, generally fences would be allowed on private property, and we don't require a permit for a fence. There is a requirement for a fence surrounding a pool. So You know, if someone had inquired with the city about building a fence, we usually tell them, make sure it's on your own property, have it just inside your property line. We would tell them at the corner, make sure if it's at a corner, not to have anything over 0.4 or 5 meters high in that site triangle area, but generally, a fence does not require a permit in the city, if it's on your own property.
Thank you. And so is there space on the applicant's property currently if it need to be relocated?
Through your worship, there is space there. It needs to be moved approximately 12 inches back onto the applicant's property. And if you look at the property, there is room for that to happen.
Sorry, I'm confused maybe. You're talking about the fence on the west side, the back side of the building,
Correct, on the back side.
not the deck?
Correct.
Okay, just
Two separate things, sorry.
two separate things, okay. Other questions? Councillor Kepke?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wondering, was the applicant going by a survey they had, thinking that they were inside the line when they built the fence, or did it just sort of happen after the fact?
I can't speak for the applicant, but my understanding is that he was lining it up with the neighbors on the back side. So the neighbors have a fence at the same length as his.
You don't know if they were going by survey stakes?
I'm not sure.
Councillor Gregg?
Well, I'll speak to it. I don't have too many questions left on it. I mean, just some reading, and it was said tonight, I'm a member, so is Councillor Kepke of the Conservation Authority, and water control, water flood control, water runoff, these are core mandates of what we heard at 7:15 tonight. And right off the bat, the report discusses covering up some city infrastructure, and it's unfortunate and it's expensive to the applicant to have made this mistake. This is something that I would assume just about any, and I could be corrected by our director, but any civil engineer would likely be aware of responsibilities in this kind of undertaking. We have to, I think, ask that it get moved back. Ontario, I think, is the only province in the country that has an obscure law where if you let something sit for too many years, then it becomes assumed by the individual who's placed that there. So it is unfortunate, it is expensive, but we have to protect the city's property in the same way that the city has a responsibility to not build on individuals' lands, because that is an equally expensive educational lesson or process for the municipality to have to undertake. So this is unfortunate, the shoe's in the other foot, but I would move the motion in the recommendation, or move the recommendation as it is, that City Council deny the application.
So motion is made. If you can go back to those pictures for me. I just had a question before they jumped, sorry. So I'm looking, yeah, we've got the before. I'm looking at the pictures at the top. So we have a storm drain under the, what is now like a patio or whatever you want to call it, on the on the north side of the building, along the side of the building. On that picture on the right, is that another storm drain that is along the fence in the back?
That's correct, Your Worship.
I was looking for a compromise there. So so looking at the west, the one that's on the back or on the west side, it would, and that being on the right hand, the photo on the right hand side, looks like that fence would be over it going across, so it's not going to mess it. Next question, I think we're kind of dancing around, but if all the neighbors are lined up there, what do we do about that?
With complaints, we would look at it, Your Worship. Again, there aren't catch basins behind the neighbor's fence, is my understanding. Is that correct, Dennis?
There are? There are not. So that's the issue. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Discussion, seeing none? Councillor Thomas, any discussion, any comments?
I guess my only comment, Your Worship, would be that this is kind of a perfect storm of problems. You know, often we do try to work with landowners, but in this case, it's just impossible to do. So I'm certainly in support of the motion.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? I'll call the question then. All in favor?
In favor?
Yeah, that's carried. Thank you. But for that storm, sir, I think things might have been different. Thank you. So we're down to 12C, being condominium exemption request for the Sydenham. Ms. Coulter.
Thank you, Worship. The city has received a request from McCarter Greenspan Lawyers on behalf of the Sydenham condominium for an exemption from the requirement to submit an application for a draft plan of condominium for property at 80 9th Street East. This property has been subject to several public processes, including site-specific zoning amendment, zoning amendment to remove the H, several minor variances, as well as site plan approval. Section 9 of the Condominium Act provides that sections of the Planning Act that apply to a plan of subdivision also apply to a condominium. So the exemption being requested is number 2 under the policy basis for exemption. The analysis of such a request really needs to consider the criteria or conditions that would normally apply to a plan of subdivision or condominium under the Planning Act. The report goes through the provincial policy statement and city's official plan, and the proposal is deemed to be consistent with the PPS and conform to the city's official plan. Section 8.33 of the official plan has criteria specifically relating to subdivision development, and first dealing with the high standard of design, second, infrastructure, that the development not be premature, access to servicing, including a public road, and lastly is parkland dedication, and that's probably the lone condition that hasn't been addressed for this development. So, Your Worship, we're recommending that a small fee for, as there isn't land area on the property for the parkland dedication, that a small fee in the amount of $5,197 be collected as cash in lieu of parkland for this development. So, the recommendation is, in consideration of the report, Council would approve the request for condominium exemption under Section 9 of the Condominium Act and direct the clerk to bring forward a bylaw authorizing the mayor and clerk to sign the exemption, and that you would require the applicant to pay cash in lieu of parkland in the amount of $5,197.
Good, thank you. Councillor Hamley.
I'll move the motion, Your Worship.
Okay, any discussion? Go ahead.
I may have missed it in your report somewhere, but how do you calculate the amount for cash in lieu for a property like this?
Through you, Your Worship, the lot area of, there were 3 individual lots, so the lot area, the assessed value of each of the lots was calculated on a per square meter basis. It was averaged over the property to come up with the calculation of $5,197.
And that's 5% of value? Yeah. Good. Did I call the question? All in favor? That's carried.
In favor.
Thank you. 12D is public appointment to corporate services. Ms. Bloomfield.
Through your worship, City Council passed the 2019 Board and Committee bylaw on January 21st. Since then, we've had a resignation to the Corporate Services Committee. Since Board and Committee selections took place not long ago, at the last closed session, Council reviewed the application material for the individuals who previously applied to the committee. During the closed session, Council directed staff to bring forward an open report and bylaw so that the new member can be appointed prior to the May 23rd committee meeting. The recommendation in the report is to direct staff to bring forward a bylaw to remove Tara Saab as a public member on the Corporate Services Committee and appoint Adriana Londano for a term beginning immediately and ending January 31st, 2022.
Good, thank you. Councillor Dodd.
Thank you, Worship, and move the recommendation.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried.
In favor.
Thank you. We there already? Yeah, 12E. Deputy Mayor O'Leary, Grey County.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have much, but I do want to talk about tourism quickly. Tourism Week is May 26th to June 2nd. Marketing activities focus on promoting Grey County to our visitors who are mostly from Toronto or GTA and Kitchener-Waterloo region. We're also seeing an increase from Barrie, London, and major population areas. Numbers have also increased from the U.S. and Quebec over the past years. We measure who is going to Grey County and why through the website visitation statistics, as well as telephone and email inquiries. We use postal code information gathered from social media campaigns. 2016 statistics show $26.8 billion in spending from visitors to Ontario and 2.7 million visitors to Grey County. The county typically attends 3 consumer trade shows during the winter months, including the Toronto Automobile Show, the Outdoor Adventure Show, and the Toronto Bicycle Show. The top 10 reasons tourists visit Grey County are visiting family and friends, beach, sightseeing, hiking, sporting events, playing a sport, cross-country skiing, skiing and snowboarding, shopping, and camping. So activities planned for Tourism Week include media release, radio campaign with Bayshore Broadcasting, launch of a refreshed visitgrey.ca webpage, and Tourism Matters activation at the Grey County Building during doors open. So Grey County tourism is alive and well, and again, Tourism Week is May 26th to June 2nd. The only other thing was we did have a presentation from Georgia College, and I believe Your Worship is...
I've got it in my notes.
Great, thank you.
Later. Any questions for Deputy Mayor O'Leary? Seeing none, we're down to 13, consent agenda. Ms. Bloomfield, want to give us the list?
Through your worship, on the consent agenda this evening is a report respecting a road closure for the 2nd Annual Pride Parade on June 8th and a report respecting the Family Fun Festival at Kelso Beach Park on June 8th. There are minutes for receipt from the Library Board, and Georgian Bay Foot Health, located in the Professional Center, received a business license. Lastly, there is correspondence presented for the information of council. A full listing is available at 13E.
Thank you. Councillor Tamming.
Your Worship, I move that City Council. Your Worship, I move that City Council receives items 13A through 13E on the consent agenda dated May 13, 2019, and further, that the recommendations contained in reports 13A and 13B be approved.
Good. All in favor? Councillor
Favor.
Good, thank you. That's carried. If we can go back to 13C, there's boards and committees with the public library. Anything you wish to report, Councillor Thomas?
March meeting, so most of what's mentioned in there has already occurred. I would draw council's attention to the HVAC update. We did have a few problems over the winter with the new roof leaking, and those leaks have now been resolved.
Good. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
Councillor Gregg may have a question for you. Go ahead.
I do have a question, but it's not related to 13C to Richard's minutes. I just have a question for earlier in the consent agenda.
Okay. So you want to turn that off? You're off the hook there for now, Richard. Go ahead with your question.
My first question is on the parade, and I was just wondering the DIA considerations or thoughts on the Saturday parade. I know I think the Santa Claus parade is the only other one, so I wondered what the DIA had considered on that, or...
Through you, Your Worship, we have consulted with the farmers market. I can't say that I have consulted with the DIA, however, I guess I would say parade within our policies on parades. I'm not sure that I normally would contact the DIA, but I guess perhaps it's an oversight.
Okay, and are we evaluating the traffic flow, or how are we evaluating? Because there's, hopefully this is great for downtown, but I know in just, shooting the breeze with other merchants, the Santa Claus parade is quite a quiet day for a lot of downtown merchants, but traffic can be heavy on Saturdays, just depending on weather too, but just wondered, are we evaluating or something then on how this works?
Through your worship, I know our administration did try and contact as many people as she could to see what impact this would be, if there's any concerns raised, and I'm not sure, 100% sure, I'm not she contacted DA or not. I can confirm that tomorrow. But in this terms, we do know that there will be, we're looking at best ways to ensure traffic can flow across town and not be impacted. And that's why in this specific case, we're looking for these police escorts through both 10th Street and 8th Street. And originally, we thought at the time we couldn't guarantee 8th Street would be open. And as such, based on the, we've since received the construction schedule from the contractor, so we were able to guarantee to have 8th Street open. In this specific case, I mean, we will be, there will be people out, especially our staff, helping set up barricades and whatnot, but to see what potential impact there can be on the parade route will have on traffic within the downtown core. This again is the second year, if I'm not mistaken, that we've had this parade. I mean, it'll be growing. You know, it's becoming very popular. It's happening everywhere else. And again, you know, it's a lesson learned. It's a living, it's a living thing in terms of how we will address it in the future. And each year we're trying to accommodate it. And as our city manager indicated, we did specifically contact the farmers market to let them know, and contacted the organizers to say that we still need access to the 9th. Or Municipal Parking Lot 9 and access to 7th Street, which will be barricaded off, but they will provide volunteers to escort people, you know, open it up to allow vehicles to get in there for the parking and for people attending the farmers market. So if anything, hopefully it does bring more people to the downtown and to our merchants, and hopefully it has a positive impact.
Thank you. Councillor Kapke.
Thank you. What time of day is the parade happening?
Hopefully it's somewhere in the report. Anyways, we can get that out, but again, this was in the original report. It may not be an updated report, because right now all we're asking for is to let people know that we are changing which roads will be open, which will be barricade, and which ones will have the police escort through. So I'm sure we have it somewhere, and we'll find out.
Councillor Thomas may have the answer.
Yes, I'll be representing you in the parade, and it starts at 11 o'clock on Saturday, June the 8th.
Good. Thank you. There's the answer. Okay. So we can go on with number 14A, minutes from Accessibility Advisory. Councillor Merton.
Through you, Your Worship. The Vice Chair position is still open, and based on attendance at the next meeting scheduled May 27th, it's anticipated that this vacancy will be filled. We appreciate the opportunity to have input for accessibility purposes for all the site plans brought to the city for consideration. This strengthens the inclusive nature of our city and of our community as a whole. The committee members identified potential challenges for the visually and functionally limited individuals during the Downtown River Precinct and the 10th Street Bridge replacement projects. This committee provides important and valuable learning opportunities regarding accessibility issues. Construction and detour barriers need to be at the eye level of the guide dogs. Otherwise, the dog walks under the barrier while the visually impaired person walks directly into it. And that was certainly a learning opportunity for those who attended the meeting. The city staff have agreed to ensure that these barriers meet those requirements to prevent injury. Based on the information provided in the agenda package and these comments, I request approval of the Accessibility Committee minutes of April the 29th, 2019.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Those are carried. Thank you. 14B, minutes of Corporate Services Committee.
Thank you, Your Worship. We had a very informative meeting. It's a wastewater meeting, so we'll get to that one shortly. But open up, we had a deputation from an individual in the public who was asking for a request on his interest and penalty charges that were applied to his property taxes. However, committee decided to stick with current policy and not waive those penalties. We had a report from our time management from our fire services. This was the end of the first quarter, so we were to have some updated notes and numbers. I should let council know that the fire data from 2018 has been refined, so there will be some modified numbers coming into the May meeting of corporate services. So the numbers you do see in the 2018 year-to-date are off. One thing we can note, though, fire calls, we've had 4, which is less than last year. Quarter 1, Building and content and vehicle fire losses at about $120,000 in the first quarter, compared to $363,000 in 2018. We can note that year to date we have overtiming at around 302 compared to about 350 from last year, and sickness hours 355 compared to 544.5 last year. So we are seeing some improvements on some of the personnel information. We received a report from the Director of Corporate Services regarding a reserve and reserve fund policy. What the new recommendation that was supported by committee was to create 3 new reserves. I guess one is already currently in use. When we have a surplus or a deficit, this is now being allocated to a tax stabilization reserve. The second reserve was facility reserves. That way, if you had a surplus in a certain area, such as the Julie MacArthur Rec Center or the Bayshore, there would be a reserve number associated with that as well. And the anticipation is that hopefully, overall, that would start to be how we envision the fleet reserve, where there would be an allocated amount there that constantly comes and pays that, so that way it's already allocated into the policy. The final one was about actually having a capital reserve. We have a discussion every single budget meeting about how much money are we putting in the capital budget. This would be a reserve that would be separate, which would be our 1% that we know we're going to allocate into our capital funding, as we have stated through our past policies. That would go into the capital reserve, and as we approved policies, or approved projects in our budget phase, it would be removed from that budget, so you'd actually have a full understanding of how much money is being allocated into that capital reserve. So more importantly, it's more about transparency. It's a little bit easier to be able to follow. That way we're not digging through numbers to try to find what we're doing. We received a report regarding Google Analytics, very similar to what Deputy Mayor O'Leary had just reported on from the county. The first 12 months of into 2019, we'd received 175,000 visits. Some of the most traffic days. Who knew? The election. That was a big one. That was a big one for everyone that wanted to come to the view our website. Canada Day celebrations, Harbour Fest, and the Do Not Use advisory. So I think the biggest thing that we're taking from that is that people in the public are very active in looking at what kind of events we have planned within our community. Top 10 locations, this is one thing that I thought was a pretty neat stat from differing from 2018 to 2019. 2018, obviously, Owen Sound was the #1 location that visited the website. In 2019, Toronto. Toronto took us by 8,000 visits, so that's interesting to watch that dynamic. The one part that I always thought is, from my economic development side, is we always say Kitchener, Guelph, Waterloo, and they didn't hit it. They didn't even hit the top 10 who are viewing us, so it's kind of interesting. The behavior, 15 most visited pages, employment opportunities, which I think that's a great representation of where the City of Owen Sound stands for individuals checking the employment opportunities. Because obviously, if that was down on the list, that would mean that less people are taking a look to see if they can be a part of our organization. Festivals and events in second, and webcams. Believe it or not, people love the webcams, so that was #3. We finally got a report. This is the highlight of the meeting, so I saw Councillor Tamming was just waiting for this report. I thought he was just going to lose it on it. But anyways, here's the report. I'm going to pass it along to the Director of Corporate Services. Once again, we're going to utilize her brilliance and let her explain that report.
Thank you to the Chair, and through you, Your Worship. The water and wastewater rate report is very similar to sort of a standalone budget for those two services. So when we do our overall budget meetings, we look at the services that are supported through taxation. Water and wastewater are fully supported through those rates. So this report is looking at how much money do we need to raise through water and wastewater rates to support the operations and future capital investments within those services. The recommendation that was approved or moved by committee is to leave the water meter service charge and water consumption charge unchanged at the 2017 level, to increase the wastewater surcharge by 6%, and to keep the rates for all properties outside the City of Owen Sound at double the amounts charged to properties within the boundaries of Owen Sound. And the rationale for that is that they only receive water services, no wastewater. So some of the background here is similar, and it has come up with our DC study. We had a rate study done for water and wastewater in 2015. At that, and it covered the period from 2015 through 2020. So we're still within the scope of that study. And the recommendation of the consultant at that time was to continue to raise water rates by 3% each year through that term of the study, and wastewater rates by 3.5%. So the combined overall increase to a invoice or a water bill would be in the roughly between 3 and 3.5%. The report summarizes our financial position for both water and wastewater, and as of the end of 2018, water does have a positive financial balance, whereas wastewater is in a significant financial deficit. That was anticipated. We know we have a huge debenture associated with the wastewater treatment plant. That's offset by a huge asset as well, but that asset does not show up in the financial statement for just the financial component. In order to look at what the appropriate increase is for the 2018-2019 year, I looked at sort of 3 scenarios. So one was to use the direction of the study and keep within that 3 to 3.5% increase as council had approved at the time the study was passed. However, because of the financial situation with water versus wastewater, the recommendation from staff is to move forward with the 3.2% increase. However, that translates to a 6% increase in wastewater and no increase to water. So when you combine them together, it works out as a combined 3.2% increase. The impact on the average household, which we estimate uses 40 cubic meters per quarter, would be $36.50 a year, or approximately $300 a month, or sorry, approximately $3 a month. However, in looking at what our needs are for for that wastewater surcharge, the increase that gets us into a position where we are more financially sustainable would be closer to 10%, in which case the average bill would be seeing an increase of 5.3 or $60 annually. And then we looked at another increase in between around 8%, which improves the situation but doesn't fully get us out of that deficit. So although we are recommending we stick with the plan, we stay with an overall increase of 3.2% for the year, 6% going to wastewater. That is with the caveat that we're going to undergo a future rate study, and I anticipate, since we are not getting where we need to be, that our future rate increases will be higher, and I expect that that will come out of the rate study that is presented to council in November of this year.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will move approval of the minutes, but I'm assuming there's going to be a number of questions coming back on water rates, but I will put the motion on the floor to move approval of the minutes.
Thank you. Okay, discussion. Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Director of Corporate Services. I'm sure you've been asked this question before, but people outside the city only pay water rates because they only use water. If I shut my water off for the winter and go to Florida and use zero water, I still pay wastewater.
You still pay for the service fee that's not consumption related.
Right. So why isn't that the same, the flip side? If they're only using water, why don't we make them pay too? I'm sure it's been discussed.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Should they not be paying towards services as well?
They pay a fixed and a variable rate, just like someone within the city would.
But only for water consumption?
Well, they pay a consumption and a fixed rate portion. They're paying the full combined bill that anyone within the city would pay, and then on top of that, we double it to account for the fact that they're not paying a wastewater charge.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Others? Councillor Tamming?
Director Allen, I emailed you earlier this week, and I don't know if the information's easily expressed. We were putting a lot of bad stuff in the harbor. and it cost a lot of money to build that plant. Is it possible that people can feel a bit better about their bill if they know that a certain percentage of their wastewater bill is going to pay down that plant? I hope my question is clear. Is it about 30%? If you could just speak to that.
Certainly. So approximately 30% of all of our wastewater revenues are going to wastewater capital debentures in total. There are certainly other debentures in there beyond the wastewater treatment plant. The wastewater treatment plant payment on its own represents approximately 16% of our total revenue on an annual basis collected from wastewater.
Just off fillings, I think people are still thinking over the, since 2010 when I've been here, we started off with the original plan came from an engineering firm, and it was a 10% annual increase for the first 5 years to try and catch up. The second study was, as Ms. Allen has stated, was much less. Some of those other infrastructure things that we're talking about, and Councillor Tammy, you just triggered this. We had more overflows. We will still have overflows, but we had more overflows because at one time all of our wastewater and all of our stormwater was going into one system. So if we got a big stormwater surge, big storm, it would overflow the system, and then the sewage basically would overflow and end up in the river. As we have done streets like 8th Street Hill, for example, we did 3rd Avenue East around 6th Street to 8th Street a few years ago. We separated those so that there is wastewater and stormwater, so we wouldn't get those overflows. So that's some of the debentures that we're talking about that aren't just the wastewater treatment plant that we can see. The unfortunate part with all of this is the cost of delivery is the infrastructure that's under the ground that we don't see. You know, it's not the water. We've got a whole bay of water out there. Clearly, there's a little bit of treatment of water that comes in, goes through the pipes, you turn it on, there it is, you flush it. There's a lot more treatment of that water going back out, the wastewater, and the infrastructure that goes with it is much more demanding. But we've got an aging infrastructure. Mr. Prentice likes to quote him every chance I can get that some of our water and wastewater infrastructure was installed by those who had a fond memory of Confederation. So a lot of it is extremely old, and if it was supposed to be amortized or written off or had a lifespan of 40 to 60 years and we're at 80 or 100, we're trying to catch up and put money into the jar so we can deal with those things. And every time we do a road, we do try and do the infrastructure, both water and wastewater, that's under those streets, separate the water from the stormwater, and it's an ongoing process. The difficulty is that we're a small town, we need to grow. We've got an infrastructure that is capable of handling more residents in this town. It doesn't take a big increase to go into those expanding neighborhoods. We're kind of there, and we need that expansion as much as anything to pay it off. But I think the other thing that to remember is from the from the Walkerton Water Inquiry, our water has to be self-sustaining. Kate, is that the right word? The system has to basically pay for itself. And that's kind of important to understand. At the time when we were looking at potential provincial requirements, we thought it made sense to have an asset management plan for our wastewater as well as our water. And well, all of our linear infrastructure at some point we're going to have to add to that, so we start to have a little less dependence on the province. As we see now there's going to be cuts coming. What do we do? So the whole idea was to start to put together a business plan. As the infrastructure was depreciated, we'd put similar money into that account to try and bring it up, and we're not getting even close to the amount that we're supposed to be putting in. So other comments, other thoughts? Otherwise, I'm going to call the question. Okay. Councillor Thomas, anything?
No comments, Your Worship. I think you covered it quite eloquently.
Thanks. Others? Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor?
In favor.
That's carried. Thanks. Minutes of the Tom Thompson Art Gallery Advisory from May 6th. Councillor Tamming will be presenting those.
I was privileged to vice chair that meeting. I have a very short report, 3 highlights. Number 1, dealing with the foundation monies. I reported last time the foundation would like to phase itself out a bit. They still have about $100,000 that they would like to expend on the gallery, something meaningful for the gallery. And we thought about digitizing, digital photographs rather, really high resolution work. Somebody comes up from Toronto and does a catalog quality type of service. We were thinking that would be very expensive. We're pleased to see that the budget will be around $16,000 to $18,000 for him to come up and give us photographs of about 200 to 225 works. So they'll be catalog ready, and that might lead to phase 2, depending again on our discussions with the foundation. Phase 2 may spin into a catalog of some sort. We still have to have those discussions, but we're very happy with the discussions we're having with the foundation. The second point I'd make is we're having a visioning seminar, all-day visioning seminar on July 13 with Gail Lord of Lord & Associates. She is an internationally renowned expert on how to promote museums and galleries. She is top-notch and has a special place in her heart for the Tom. We're much smaller than what she usually deals with, but she's coming down and she's going to give us some focus, and we're really looking forward to that. The third point is we are on the verge of a membership drive. We're going to call people up that perhaps haven't joined us in a while, and we're going to try to reactivate members and get some new ones. We remain a very cheap date, $35, and we're going to be on a roll in the next months doing that. And that is my report, subject to any questions, Your Worship.
Councillor Thomas, anything you want to add?
I think what I could add is that just to follow up on the cheap date concept, I attended the Vancouver Art Gallery this past week and paid $24 to spend an afternoon there.
Yikes.
So we are getting excellent value for our money in Owen Sound.
Thank you. So Councillor Tamming, you did move the report, I believe. So any questions? All in favor?
In favor.
That's carried. Good. Thank you. Well done. Number 15, we have no matters that are postponed. We have no motions for which notice was previously given. Discussion of additional business. Councillor Kepke.
Thank you, Your Worship. May 12th to 18th is Police Week in Ontario, and Owen Sound Police Services have certainly joined in on activities this week. Today there was a Shop with a Cop session between police services and the Meaford Optimist Club, and students from Eastridge and Alexander Elementary School went shopping to see if they can economically buy a basket of groceries, and then the food was then donated to the Salvation Army Food Bank. Tomorrow there's the kids program graduation at Eastridge School, and Wednesday there will be a Chief for the Day of a grade 5 student. So we look forward to seeing some media on who that Chief for the Day is. Thursday, Chief Citation Awards will be taking place, as well as a special luncheon with respect to that event. Friday, there's a social networking that's taking place, and Saturday there will be tours, guided tours of the police station from 1 p.m. till 3 p.m. So anyone who would like to take a tour of the police services, you can do that on Saturday from 1 till 3. The theme for Police Week is proudly supporting our police. So I would ask that if you see a police officer out there, that you certainly thank them for the job that they're doing in protecting our persons and property in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tamming.
I had the joy, and I'll use that word, of representing council this past Friday night at the founding meeting of Indwell Owen Sound. There were about 30 to 40 people there, and it was organized by Harry Huff and the ministerial of the Owen Sound area. Former Councillor Dick Hibma is very involved in this organization. We heard from Indwell, which was Hamilton-based, and what they do is build or renovate apartments for people who need light assistance. So you could be perhaps on an autistic spectrum, you could perhaps be on ODSP with certain mental health issues. certain addictions that you're dealing with. They have a phenomenal track record of making precarious housing somewhat stable, and they have an average tenancy of about 4 years for their tenants, which anyone who deals with troubled homeless or precarious housed people can tell you that's an outstanding record. They work with the municipalities. They're strictly not-for-profit, obviously, and they very much would like to speak to us at some point in time down the road and give a presentation. London, Woodstock, the town of Simcoe, and Hamilton. They're in all those places. They have 12 buildings up and going. They're moving towards about 1,000 tenants. It sounds like a really good thing for us to listen to, and I look forward to reporting more on that. Owen Sound, Indwell.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg.
Thanks, everybody. A week ago, I was able to represent council by attending the debut showing of the film or the documentary Resilience. I was already planning on it, so it was a pleasure to get to be able to represent the mayor there that night. But I'd like to say kudos to go out to locals John Anderson and Liz Zetlin for their production, and actually in incorporating Councillor Kepke into that film. She did make a cameo appearance, and but they did a terrific job. It was a sold-out, standing room only turnout, and I believe the Roxy hosts about approximately 450 people, so this was greater than 450 people looking for places to sit people down. So great job by Liz and John in producing their film, and it was a very enlightening and progressive film on today's climate, and I might even submit that it's a bit of a purview in terms of you know, the socio-economic conditions that are coming at all of humanity at increasing speed and the shortening time frame. So
good, thank you. I've got 4 or 5 things to cover here. I was invited to attend and welcome both my behalf and Warden Hicks' behalf. Colleges and Institutes Canada have an annual conference. They had a pre-conference forum here in Owen Sound on sustaining campuses in small communities, obviously hosted by Georgian College. There's approximately 85 people in Owen Sound for it from New Zealand, Australia, Yellowknife, Quaalude, Quebec, New Brunswick, northern BC, all over the place. I made a lot of notes, and a lot of what they're talking about applies to small communities, not just small colleges. Really interesting conversation around the table and from the presenters and in the room. It was great to be there and to be supporting Georgian College and supporting them in our small community. As Deputy Mayor O'Leary hit on, Georgian College made a presentation at Grey County last Thursday. I've grabbed some of the slides that I'll go through fairly quickly. They have Georgian College has 13,000 full-time students on their 7 campuses. They have 3,600 international students from 85 countries. I've forgotten the exact number of how many foreign students we have in Owen Sound, but it's an opportunity to build on. Average age of their students is 22, 52% female, 48% male. There are 75,000 alumni members. They offer 130 programs, so degrees, combined degrees, diplomas, graduate certificates, diplomas, certificates, apprenticeships, and more. We have a new apprenticeship, pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship program. The pre-apprenticeship program is a 34-week program. So it's introduction to welding, electrician, millwright, carpentry, boilermaker. So it's a chance to get people in and get some training before they start working, to get them in to see if it's something that they're interested in. We know that we've got a shortage of skilled labor in Owen Sound, Grey County, Ontario, Canada, all over, but especially with Bruce Power's plans over the next 30 years. A young kid would be a lot smarter to go into welding, electrician, etc., than to go to law school. Apprenticeship programs, educational assistants, electrician, industrial and construction maintenance, hairstyling, millwright, those are all available here. Of course, we have the Marine Emergency Duties program, so it's the program for marine excellence in central Canada. Georgian College is working on addressing the healthcare shortage in the region, so nursing and various jobs that we're going to have a shortage of people to fill those jobs, trying to get them trained, get them ready. Georgian College is recognized leader in co-op education and student work experience, so it's one of the best in the country at the college level for co-op, so kids can go and work for a term and go to school for a term, both here in Owen Sound and all the campuses. Georgian College's economic impact in Owen Sound. Georgian College contributed $87.5 million in income in Grey Bruce counties, or approximately 1.3 of the GRP. For every $1 invested by taxpayers, there's a $12.80 return in Owen Sound. So as Grey County has put in money for the Marine Emergency Duty program, as well as going forward with the purchase of Sydenham School and being able to enhance that, turning it into a skills training center and a entrepreneurial incubator type place. There's the expansion. Approximately 20 different programs in the Owen Sound campus. We know about culinary skills and how good they are, community integration through cooperative education. Office administration, executive, legal services, general health, power engineering technology, practical nursing, of course, marine technology, navigation, and engineering, electrical techniques, early childhood education. Lots of programs for a kid to be interested in nowadays can be started here, and you can end up with a university degree starting with a diploma at Georgian College. They're hooked up with Lakehead University, so it's we perhaps don't toot Georgian College enough on how important they are to our community and how important our community is to them. 10 days ago, I attended the 77th annual ceremonial review of the 167 Air Marshal Bishop VC Squadron of the Royal Canadian Air Cadets. This is a highlight in my calendar every year. These kids are just, they're little kids at the back. 1 year and 4 years later, they're at the front leading, and they've got self-confidence. They all come up and talk to you. I've got friends from that group that will be anywhere from 14 to 21 probably by now that I run into on the street and have a conversation with just by attending that one night. It's a remarkable group of kids, remarkable leadership, and they work very hard and very precise. Today I received a little letter, if I can read it to you, if I can get there, dated May 13th, 2019. Dear Mayor Ian Boddy, our, what's SK? Senior Kindergarten 1 class went on a field trip to Blacks Park on Friday, May 10th. While there, we found a lot of garbage. Most of it was dog poop in plastic bags. I'm going to come back to that. We think if there was a garbage can in the park, maybe people would throw their garbage in the can instead of in the forest. Look at that. Do you think this is possible? We'll be visiting the park again on Friday, May 17th and Friday, May 24th. Please write back to us, and we hope to see a garbage can soon. Mrs. Duncan's Senior Kindergarten 1 class, and then they've all signed it at Hillcrest. So that's kind of nice. Blacks Park's in my neighborhood. When my son, who's now 21, was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, we went in on the Monday of every Easter and cleaned it up. We started off with a lot of pop cans and kids' lunches that have been thrown away, and little by little we whittled it down. But the last few years, we finally got frustrated because People pick up their dog waste on other people's front lawns, put them in a plastic bag that don't break down, go into a park and toss it. So for 10 years, they're still running into the same problem. We had an entire garbage bag full of other people's dog waste. I don't understand why somebody wouldn't take it home, be responsible for their own dog, and you know, to leave it for kindergarten kids to pick up after them. They should be embarrassed. I know I'm not supposed to shame people, got in trouble for that before, but I think these kids are shaming people that do that. So I encourage everybody in the city to pick up after your own dog. Quick update on, we had motions a couple of months ago, February, because I was away. One was to have discussions with Georgian Bluffs on being able to get their maybe green bin service out to their biodigester. We have had those conversations. We've met with them. They're very much interested, but they need to add one little process that will remove contaminants from that bio waste before they can put it into their machine. Interestingly, the town of Meaford already has an agreement with Georgian Bluffs to go ahead as soon as the system is ready. So we're playing catch up on that. So we've had that meeting and can move forward. We also wrote, that was February 6th, that we wrote to municipality of West Grey and the town of Hanover to discuss policing. We heard back from Hanover. I wrote again and left phone messages for West Grey and finally got a message last week that they're not interested in having any partnership discussions whatsoever. We have met with Hanover. We will proceed and find what ways we can make that work. I have had some discussions with other mayors in other municipalities in the area that are interested in seeing how we can work together. And you know, we're not talking about amalgamations. We're just trying to find ways that we can work together. And we're happy to talk to anyone that's interested in talking to us. So I'll give you more updates on that as we go forward. So that's my list of additional business. Next, John, I think you'll have their motion that committee rise.
I am pleased to move that the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
And all in favor?
Favor.
Sorry, go ahead again.
I am also pleased...
Sorry, John. Richard, if you want to go ahead, we didn't have the...
In favor.
Good, thank you. Now, so that is carried. Councillor Tamming, we're at number 19, adopting, I think.
I am also pleased to move, seconded by Brock Hanley, that the action taken in Committee of the Whole in considering public meetings, deputations and presentations, public question period, matters arising out of correspondence, reports of city staff, consent agenda, committee minutes, matters postponed, motions for which notion was previously given, and all additional business be confirmed by this council.
All in favor? That is carried.
In favor.
Thanks. Notices of motion. Anyone have a notice to give to us? Seeing none. Hold on just for a minute. Councillor Tamming, bylaws, Ms. Bloomfield.
Through your worship, the bylaws listed for approval on tonight's agenda include the confirmatory bylaw, a bylaw to amend the board and committee bylaw respecting an appointment to the Corporate Services Committee, and 2 bylaws to execute facility use agreements, one with the Agricultural Society for use of the barn at Victoria Park, and one with Bettenker Connell for use of Duncan McClellan Park for slow pitch tournament.
Good, thank you. Now, Councillor Tamming.
I am pleased to move that bylaws number 2019-079, 2019-080, 2019-081, and 2019-082 be enacted and passed.
All in favor?
In favor.
That is carried. So that completes our business. It is 9:12 or 6:12 for Councillor Thomas. That completes our business for the night. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for calling in, Richard. That worked. Thanks.